Prime's exclusive wildcard playoff game is Saturday night. Jordan Love and the Packers take on Caleb Williams and the Bears. Not a Prime member? Sign up for a 30-day free trial to stream the game.
That's going to be caught for the touchdown.
NFC North rivals square off in the latest chapter of the NFL's oldest feud. The Packers and Bears in Prime's exclusive wildcard playoff game. Saturday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. Only on Prime. Sign up for a 30-day free trial today. Restrictions apply. See Amazon.com/Amazon Prime for details.
Oh, it's such a clutch off-season pickup, Dave.
I was worried we'd bring back the same team.
I meant those blackout motorized shades.
Blinds.com made it crazy affordable to replace our old blinds.
Hard to install?
No, it's easy. I installed these and then got some for my mom. She talked to a design consultant for free and scheduled a professional measure and install.
Hall of Fame son.
They're the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings in the world.
Blinds.com is the GOAT.
Visit Blinds.com now for up to 45% off with minimum purchase plus a free professional measure. Rules and restrictions apply.
Sports Social Podcast Network, the biggest voices in sports. Let's take a look at some of the lineup. Big Kick Energy.
Well, I was doing a Zoom gig and somebody got up and went and made a cup of tea and I just heard them go, not for me.
Late Breaking.
Verstappen has more sprint wins than Leclerc has regular wins.
Wisden Cricket Weekly.
All-rounder. Tough, really close between Stokes and Flintoff, but I went Stokes. The whole package, I think, beats Flintoff.
All on Europe's biggest sport podcast network. Find your next favourite sport podcast. Search Sports Social Podcast Network and listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Verified comparison at content.sport-social.co.uk/comparison.
Hello everyone, Chris here. Just a quick reminder that this episode of How We're the Podcast is sponsored by LifeScoreBet, a proud principal partner of Sunderland AFC. And if you're looking to get started, they've got a cracking welcome offer for new customers. Bet £10 on sports and get £30 in free bets. Simple as that. So if you're ready to join the action, make sure you're doing it with LifeScoreBet, the home of total betting. New members only. Bet more than £10 on sports within 14 days. Free bets valid 7 days. £20 to use on Sportsbook. £10 on Bet Builder. Terms and conditions and deposit exclusions apply. Please bet responsibly and remember, over 18s only. And now, cue the music. Hello everyone, I'm Chris Wynn and welcome to How We're the Podcast, sponsored by LifeScoreBet. And as much as we are loving the Premier League this season, it does feel like a good time to have a welcome distraction for the lads as we head into the FA Cup third round weekend. But the draw hasn't been kind. We are one of 4 all Premier League ties where a fifth of top flight sides will exit the competition at the first hurdle, potentially leaving it wide open, but we will no doubt come on to all of that. We travelled to Everton for an early kickoff, so if you listen to this ahead of the game and you're travelling, please stay safe because the weather is absolute crap at the moment. But you may know some team news as we peek behind the curtain. We are recording the day before, so you may know more than us because since the final whistle went at Brentford, the debate got going on what changes the manager might or might not make for this third round tie. So we've got plenty to get into, and I have 2 gentlemen who have very kindly donated their time to go through all of this ahead of the game. And first up, we have Johnny Hawley. Hello, Johnny.
Yes, hello, yeah. Excited and thrilled to be here in the trenches with you lads, ready to talk about the start of what could be a magical cup run.
In the trenches, you make it sound like a chore, mate. But anyway, but actually, I'm genuinely interested, actually, mate, because FA Cup third round weekend, and it used to be a really. I used to love it. Talking when I'm pretty young, but I used to love it. And I remember when I was pretty young, Wrexham beating Arsenal. That was kind of the biggest one I remember. But I remember, third round weekend, absolutely loving it, and we were playing and all of that sort of stuff. I mean, it didn't last very long with Sunderland. We usually got knocked out at the first attempt. But you must have got into it, I would guess, around the time when Man United just didn't bother playing in the FA Cup all those years ago. And people say that's when the FA Cup lost a bit of magic. But what does FA Cup third round mean to you?
Well, I mean, it definitely, it mustn't be the same as what it was, like you say, when yous were a bit younger and the cup was, I was going to say it was in its heyday, but that's a whole other podcast in itself to discuss the rise and fall of the FA Cup over the years. But I've always been quite a traditionalist with it myself. I love the FA Cup. Like, I think it's it's a competition I definitely take seriously. You know, there's all the discussions, like you say, Man United pulling out and all that stuff, and, you know, teams fielding weakened sides and all the rest of it, all the, you know, the replays and fixture congestion and all the, you know, the nonsense that we've got to talk about in modern football. But I love the FA Cup. Like, I always get excited for the third round when we're good, when we're in the Premier League. Usually it might be a slightly earlier round over the past 8 years, but I'm looking forward to it myself. I was really happy that we got a good draw as well. Like, not as in a favourable draw, but a proper... I feel like Sunderland going to Everton, you know, that does feel like a proper cup tie to me. Although, you know, we might mention it, but we don't necessarily have the best memories of playing Everton in the FA Cup. We'll not dwell on that too much, but yeah, I think it means a lot still. You know, I'm aware that the football landscape's changed, but I love the FA Cup. I think it's a proper occasion, and third round weekend's always a good one.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you started that whole thing by saying I might not have the memories of yous, I mean in plural, because also with us today is Bomber. Hello, Bomber.
Hello, Chris. Hello, Johnny. Nice to be with you once again, albeit for an FA Cup weekend.
Yes, well, as Johnny hinted, you're a slightly more, well, let's just say experienced gentleman like myself, Bomber.
Yeah, didn't appreciate that, Johnny.
Well, he did include you. You're in the same bucket, so I'll take that. But what status, you know, does the FA Cup have for you? Because I think I do think the FA Cup's a generational thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, I look at the FA Cup very much as a nostalgia thing now, and maybe that's because we've been out of any sort of realistic chance of doing anything in the FA Cup for so many years now that it's kind of devalued, or it's been devalued to me over the last 7-8 years or so, maybe a little bit longer. But my FA Cup memories are from, you know, my formative years, you know, early teens through to adulthood. You know, the cream Liverpool Cup final suits, that sort of era is where the FA Cup for me,
the Spice Boys,
yeah, was something that held a bit of gravitas, I guess, in my footballing calendar anyway. But yeah, over the years, I think there's just so much football now, and you know, we get exposed to so many other types of football, I guess, or so many other competitions like your Champions Leagues, your Europa Leagues, your Nations Leagues, and now access to pretty much any other major European domestic league that you could possibly want to watch. That I think the FA Cup for this generation anyway gets lost a little bit, and it struggles for airtime. Not struggles for airtime, it struggles for recognition, struggles to hold its own against those, you know, what they're competing against, unless, you know, you have those dream ties of a third round, your non-league versus your Premier Leagues at a stadium that holds 1,000 people. That's where the FA Cup still holds a bit of magic for me.
Yeah. Well, just a quick one on that, Bomber, because when I was looking into this, I had to actually check about replays. Because and do you think that's one thing that we can throw into the hat, is that it's almost killed some of the magic? Because one of the things when I was young was when you had a small team going to a bigger team, they would almost play to get a replay and celebrate just probably even more sometimes when they got that replay to go to a big ground or to take them back to their place.
Yeah, well, the prime example of that, was it last year or the year before, Spurs and Tamworth?
Yeah.
Where you know, they held them for 90 minutes and then ended up getting, well, I think it was 3-0. They got battered in extra time just because, you know, the Spurs are a professional outfit and got infinitely more stamina, depth of squad, etc. So yeah, I think that does lose it a little bit. I can understand. Well, I can't understand it really, because that's again the tradition of the FA Cup, and they've taken that away again to accommodate basically the big boys that are in Europe and play those European competitions and play 60 games in a season, and completely forgotten about the League One, the League Two outfits, the non-league outfits, who, you know, for all intents and purposes, that Tamworth example, they would have gone back to, I was going to say White Hart Lane, but they'd have gone back to the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, and probably Spurs would have given them a full gate, and that would have seen them through for probably the next 5 or 6 seasons in terms of their operating costs. So you have that romance that is died a little bit with it, unless you get those cup upsets in the 90 minutes. But yeah, it's a little bit. It's a shame. It is a shame. But like I said, it's another game, and realistically, it's a good opportunity to test ourselves once again, and depending on how we want to approach it, we could see it as something that we've always been surprised at just how good we are in the Premier League. So it stands to reason that we could be quite good in an FA Cup run as well, particularly when other Premier League sides might be fielding weakened teams. So yeah, it's a bit of a strange one, and I flip flop and really sit on the fence as to whether I want us to go for it or whether I want us to kind of just give other players a run out and see what happens and not really be too fussed about it.
Yeah, we've got some time to think about that, because you will be telling us what you think about that before we finish up. But Johnny, you did mention it and talking about replays. We have to go back to that time, don't we? We have to mention that last time we played Everton in the FA Cup quarter-final.
Do we have to?
Yeah, go on, because you never know, we might beat them this time around. But quarter-final of the FA Cup, it was potentially the end of the Martin O'Neill kind of era, really, because everything seemed to go downhill after that. But talking about replays, though, Johnny, because we were brilliant at Goodison Park, if I remember. We should have beat them in that first game at their place. I don't know if you remember that first one, but yeah, and then we just didn't turn up, and that was kind of the last real kind of cup run where we thought we've got a chance, well, especially in the FA Cup.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny as well, because that is always the one that sticks out in the memory, isn't it? As our sort of last best chance in the FA Cup. It's so easy to forget that we got to the same stage in the 13-14 season when we got to the League Cup final as well. But because we had that many fixtures, that was when we had, Ustari starting in goal and just a total second string 11 that day. So I think we all kind of memory hole that one and go, well, that didn't count because we didn't take it seriously. So the Everton one being the last one where, because I remember going to I was going to say the second leg. I remember going to the replay at the Stadium of Light, and like going into the game, I think most people were, if not quietly confident, then at least thinking like, this is a proper chance here to get to Wembley. Which, and the semi-finals being at Wembley, again, that's a whole different conversation we could have about how much of a disgrace that is. But that was the chance, wasn't it? Where it felt like that could have been, in some ways, like the culmination of the Roy Keane promotion story was the beginning. Quinn coming in as chairman, Keane takes us up, we build and build and build. If we'd been able to get to a final and add an FA Cup on top of it, that would have felt like the sort of, we'd reached the summit almost at that point. And then who knows what you can do from there. But like you say, in the end, it ended up being slightly different than that. Didn't turn up on the night, I think, is the way to sum it up. And from there, it was just a slow and gradual decline, wasn't it? But with the exception of that League Cup run, I think, under Gus Poyet and some memorable derby results. That did feel like a real turning point when you look back. So, yeah, hopefully we have a better outcome this time than we did last time. But yeah. I hope we do take it as seriously as we can. Obviously, like Bomber's just said, we'll get onto that and we'll have to discuss it. But I really hope we do, because I think it's underrated still how much of an impact a successful or unsuccessful cup run can have on a team. We all know how important momentum is in football. We talk about it within games all the time. We talk about it in terms of runs of results in a league season. Cup runs fall into that just as much as anything else does. And aside from anything else, it's never good to get into the habit of losing games. So, I'm not saying Reggie's going to be sticking up the match report and the scoreboard from that last FA Cup game against Everton on the dressing room wall and saying, you got to do it for Davy Vaughan. But I'm hoping that he at least, has us maybe slightly more motivated than we were at the first whistle that night.
Yeah, it is a good job we can laugh about David Vaughan's attempt to clear the ball all these years later. But
laughing through the tears, I think.
Yeah, it was interesting. We'll talk about form, but I remember in '92 when we reached the final, when we couldn't get a point in any league game, but we were beating all the top flight sides in the FA Cup. But about Everton in the FA Cup, I was at the fourth round game in January 2005 as well, when we got thumped 3-0 at Goodison in the fourth round that year. Not sure if either of you can remember that one or not. No.
I can vaguely remember it. I can vaguely remember it.
Well, I'll take
the team that we had out anyway that day.
I was just very grateful that I was behind a big bollard that day that obscured my view at Goodison Park, and I didn't get to see all of it. But yeah, quick question, maybe one for the listeners on that game, actually, that one in January 2005. Can you guess which player scored for Everton that would go on to play for Sunderland around 7 or 8 years later? He opened the score on that day. It's a proper obscure one.
So 7 or 8 years later. So we're talking 12, 13 time.
Yeah. It's an obscure one.
I think I know who it is.
Go on then.
Is it James McFadden?
It is James McFadden.
Yeah, get him.
Yeah, he opened the score on that day. But anyway, let's get into kind of FA Cup over the last few years very quickly, because I've got another quick question for you, gents. Test your memories. Who were the last side that Sunderland knocked out of the FA Cup?
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, it's a good one, isn't it? I couldn't.
We normally get knocked out of the first time.
Yeah. I had to look it up. I had no clue. I had to look it up.
How many years ago are we talking?
It goes back 3, so it goes back to January 2023.
So we would have been in the early rounds of that.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, it's before the Fulham game, isn't it? Is it Shrewsbury?
It
I was
was.
going to say.
It was.
I was going to say.
Sorry,
we played them twice. We played them twice in like 3 or 4 weeks, didn't we? I'm sure we did. Because didn't we play them in the league and League One as well?
No, we were in the Championship at this point.
I'm thinking too far back then.
January 20. And can you remember the actual how the game went? Because they scored with about 10 minutes to go and took the lead, and we were going to go out. And Ross Stewart and Luke O'Nien scored 2 in stoppage time.
Yeah.
Was
that Chris Riggs' debut in that game?
That's a good show.
I'm
Johnny
very
with the
confident.
trivia.
I'm very confident he came off the bench.
Yeah, well, he scored, didn't he? He scored at Fulham, didn't he? In the next round.
And then it got ruled out for offside.
Yeah, so it could well been his debut in that game. But yeah, so we have to look way back to find the last time we did one. And you've got to think that it was only 4 years ago when we were getting knocked out in the first round before the festive season. This time, 4 years ago, it was Mansfield Town at home. We got beat 1-0.
That's the one I'm thinking of, I think. Yeah.
So, to be fair...
What happened in the FA Cup in 2024? Was it voided that year, I think? They didn't have an FA Cup, did they, in 2024 No, they mustn't have. I don't think we played any FA Cup games in 2024.
Took a while for me to clock on there, Johnny.
Yeah, it did me. It's been expunged from the records, but...
I was going back to COVID thinking, they still had an FA Cup.
I thought he's got the wrong year, right? Surely go back to 2020. But yeah, so that loss against Mansfield, so it's still nice to just be in the third round without having to navigate games like that. But our recent record absolutely stinks. We've got past the third round just once in the last 10 years, which was that occasion there. But we'll get into kind of the team and the possibility of freshening things up in a minute. But I was going to put to you, Bomber, that actually it feels to me after that Brentford game, and actually it was interesting to hear Nick Barnes go straight into it in the press conference. We're talking about, watching that Brentford game, and it feels like at the minute a distraction from the Premier League just feels like a good thing at this moment.
Yeah, I was thinking that after the Brentford game myself, in that we've played so many games over this Christmas and New Year period, and it's really for the first time that we've experienced the relentlessness of the Premier League. Like, we thought the Championship and it was relentless when you're playing Saturday, Tuesday, but to be able to do that at Premier League level really is intense. And we've pretty much, by and large, had to play the same starting 11, bar a couple. Riggs started a game, but by and large, we've gone Leeds, Spurs, Man City, Brighton, all with pretty much the same starting 11. It just feels like we need a little bit of time just to catch our breath and regroup away from the Premier League. So yeah, I think I agree with you that it really couldn't have come at a better time, especially given the result and the performance of the Brighton game. It's something that can take the minds away from it.
Yeah, I'd say, and actually, Johnny, again, it was kind of raised in the press conference in terms of the questioning fatigue during the Brentford game, and the manager did respond to say that look, until the penalty miss, we were still in the game, and that kind of swung the momentum. So he was kind of adamant to say that fatigue wasn't an excuse, and went on to say kind of those experiences are important for this team to learn. But did you get that feeling against Brentford, Johnny, that we either looked physically or mentally tired? Or do you think it was just a performance that, was maybe a level lower than what we've been used to this season?
Well, it was definitely, the performance was definitely worse, in terms of the technical aspects and stuff. Like there were mistakes that were being made that I'm sure the fatigue, both mental and physicals, played a part. But, things like Mukiele and Alderete getting caught on the ball, within a few yards of their own box, that's, you can be fatigued, you can be, running at a little bit below your usual level. You still shouldn't be making those kind of mistakes, right? So that's something that I think we need to just accept, that the performance level wasn't up to par. But on top of that, look, Labris isn't going to come out in the press conference and say, "Oh, the only reason Brentford beat us was because we were tired, lads." Like, even if he thought it, which he wouldn't, he's never going to say it. But I bet you behind closed doors, they are, looking at they'll obviously have all the physical data for the players and who's in the red zone and whatever else they're calling it now. They'll know that certain players are, if not struggling, certainly, falling a little bit below their usual levels in terms of the fitness, the sharpness. I think sharpness is the biggest one, to be honest, because you can still be fit and able to get through the miles in a game that you need to get through, but it's that half a second reaction time that you might just lose slightly if you're running on empty a little bit. So I've got no doubt that it's played a part. I just think we all know the situation we've been in with AFCON and Ballard's injury and Isidore's injury and stuff. So we were never going to be able to rotate the team. So it's an extenuating circumstance. But I just think the mental side of it goes so underappreciated. Like, even if you've got your full complement of players available, you're still going to have like the majority of the same players from week to week that are playing each game, barring the odd change, substitutions and stuff. I think Bomber's right. This is the first time we've experienced this relentless side of the Premier League. You get your physical grounding coming up from League One and the Championship, playing 46 league games and a few cup games, and you have all the midweeks in the world. But and this is not to say that League One and Championship aren't tough leagues. We know that they are. We're the proof that they are. But it's not the same as having to be at absolute 100%. And if you drop off at all, you're getting punished. Like that Man City game, people were flying into challenges and pressing and getting about the pitch and trying to create
a cup final. In the ground, it felt like a cup final.
It really did, didn't it? Like, it had that kind of feel to it, in the atmosphere, the way that people were playing. And we had to do all of that just to get a 0-0 draw. You play to that level of intensity in the Championship, unless you're playing another team who's as good as you, and you're the top team in the league, like, you're beating anybody if you play like that. In League One, exactly the same. But in the Premier League, we were worse against Spurs, but we still had to dig in that much in the second half to come back and get a goal and get a point. I think that's going to take way more out of them than even the physical side does. And like I say, that's while totally accepting that I'm sure that particularly somebody like, Dennis Serkin, I'm sure he's been physically struggling, which is probably partly why he didn't start against Brentford, because we've got players who haven't played much this season. They've had injuries. So those things are going to be worse for certain players. But I think just as a group, the amount of mental energy they've had to go through just to tread water in terms of results, and then obviously it's ended disappointingly at Brentford, that's going to have taken, I imagine, as much, if not more, out of them. And it's something that I think can turn into a bit of a positive wheelie for this game, because that's not the case now. It's still going to be a hard game. We're going to have to battle if we want to get something out of it, but there are no points on the line. Nobody's going up or down the league table based on this. We want to win the game, absolutely, but if we do lose the game, there isn't that same hangover, I think. Whereas, I don't know about you, but the day after the Brentford game, I woke up and I was like, oh, God, football, oh.
Yeah. Well, we'll get into that a bit more, because I think before we get into Everton and before the lads try and read Reggie's thoughts, we'll take a quick break. So we'll be back very soon.
Well, the holidays have come and gone once again, but if you've forgotten to get that special someone in your life a gift, well, Mint Mobile is extending their holiday offer of half off unlimited wireless. So here's the idea. You get it now, you call it an early present for next year. What do you have to lose? Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Limited time 50% off regular price for new customers. Upfront payment required. $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan. Taxes and fees extra. Speeds may slow after 50 gigabytes per month when network is busy. See terms.
Sports Social Podcast Network, the biggest voices in sports. Let's take a look at some of the lineup. Big Kick Energy.
Well, I was doing a Zoom gig and somebody got up and went and made a cup of tea, and I just heard them go, not for me.
Late Breaking.
Verstappen has more sprint wins than Leclerc has regular wins.
Wisden Cricket Weekly.
Draw rounder. Tough, really close between Stokes and Flintoff, but I went Stokes. The whole package, I think, beats Flintoff.
All on Europe's biggest sport podcast network. Find your next favourite sport podcast. Search Sports Social Podcast Network and listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Verified comparison at content.sport-social.co.uk/comparison.
And welcome back to How We're the podcast, sponsored by LiveScore Bet. And we'll get into Everton a little bit before we come back onto the lads, Bomber. But just a very quick one, Bomber, because when the draw was made, and we got Everton away, a Premier League side, what were your thoughts? Because if you had to choose a third round tie, what would you choose?
Oh, for a third round tie, I don't know. I think the problem is that if you want to take the FA Cup seriously and you want to have a run in it, then you've got to accept that you're going to be coming up against your peers in the Premier League at some point. So whether you've got the opportunity to knock one out, so to speak, in the third round or in the later rounds.
Can't wait for the comment to this pod.
It's neither here nor there. But on the other hand, you do want to have a bit of a easier entry, I guess, into the FA Cup, and
Ridiculous.
not have to start not start having to contemplate playing some of the bigger boys in the earlier rounds.
Are you taking a bet to see how many innuendos you can get into this?
Really not. They're just slipping off the tongue, so to speak. But yeah, so
that's a technique issue, I think.
But I think given the number of teams that are in that do go into that third round draw, you are always hoping for a League One, a League Two team, possibly not to have the spotlight on you so much as to get one of the non-league boys and then have yourself on BBC One at some weird hour and some weird setup. But yeah, I think for the third round, maybe the fourth round, you probably want somebody from a lower division, and you're almost kind of warming up into it. And then, as you get into rounds 5, 6, and so on, then it starts, or the prospect of doing something in that competition becomes a real possibility. And then it kind of doesn't matter who you play, because at that point, for the likelihood is your Arsenals, your Man Cities, etc., are going to be there. So it is a bit disappointing to have Premier League opposition in the third round, but equally, it's an opportunity to get rid of a rival who will probably also fancy their chances of a bit of a cup run. And I think this year as well, because there are four all Premier League sides. Yeah. So in terms of an opportunity, we get through this, and Everton are gone. And by the time the fourth round comes along, you're gonna have one of Man United or Brighton having gone. You're gonna have one of Bournemouth and Newcastle gone. You're gonna have I can't remember what one of Spurs or Villa gone. Who again, both of those will fancy their chances of an FA Cup run. So all of a sudden, the draw and the number of teams that are left in that fourth round starts to look a little bit more gettable in terms of progressing into the latter stages. I think if we were the only all Premier League tie, I'd feel a little bit hard done by. But given that we're one of four, and given that some of the, like I said, Spurs and Villa have been drawn against each other, so one of those are going to go.
Yeah.
I think we should probably relish the opportunity to get rid of a potential FA Cup rival and reap the rewards of having seen a number of other Premier League clubs fall by the wayside in the fourth round.
Yeah. I mean, you did go a slight shade of red, by the way, during that bomb. Our listeners obviously can't see that. But
it's just the words were coming out, and then I realised what I was saying after and it just wouldn't stop.
Anyway, Johnny, I kind of said this about Sunderland at the very top, but that it feels like a distraction for us. But having seen Everton in midweek against Wolves, they needed, I think they were holding on at the end when they went down to 9 men at home to Wolves in a game they probably just expected 3 points from. But they've only won 1 in 6, and it feels like they're in the same boat where they need a break from the Premier League as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Everton they had a pretty quick start to the season, didn't they? And a lot of people were talking very positively about their attacking options and Grealish in particular. And, there seemed to be a lot of optimism. And then it felt like they've went the way, not as badly as Bournemouth have, but they went the way of Bournemouth a bit, where great start, a lot of optimism, and then it's just sort of fizzled away. Now, Everton are obviously still doing all right. They're, around us in the table, aren't they? Possibly above us after the other night. I haven't checked, but they, like you say, similar run of form. I think the 2 red cards will have... I mean, obviously, the Premier League suspensions don't count for the FA Cup, do they? Or do they?
No, that Grealish is out because they were talked about it in the press conference. So they were asking what impact does that have? Right,
there you go. So then they've got 2 suspensions.
He could have had another virus and been out in another nightclub, trying to drink it off.
Yeah, that's the Harry Brook school of preparation for any cricket enjoyers. But so that they do have their, they've got their own set of headaches that they've got to deal with in a very similar way that we've had with, again, the AFCON absences and what have you. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting one because I think we have no idea really, do we, what Regis Lebris looks like as a cup manager, because last season he had no scope to go for them. We had to focus on promotion, and we obviously just wouldn't have had the team to try and mount a serious run at either cup. I know there's people who'll be like, anybody can win any game on any day, but how many cup winners have there been outside the top flight in the past 30 years? There's your answer. So we don't know how seriously he would like to take it or not. Whereas like David Moyes, I think there's a pretty strong body of work to suggest he's not likely to take the early rounds of the Cups particularly seriously. He's one of those managers, I think, isn't he, where after a few rounds, if you're still in it, he'll look at it and go, right, okay, let's go for this now. Because I think he got Everton to an FA Cup final, didn't he, in 2008 or something like that?
Rings a bell.
He definitely got them to Wembley anyway. So it's like he's had cup runs before, but he's not ideologically driven to compete in the cup. So I think we could see, I think we're likely to see 2 teams who are naming similarly mixed 11s and are similarly going to just try and figure each other out. I mean, we'll get onto the game itself, but it strikes me that we're going to be 2 teams in very similar boats approaching the game in very similar ways.
Yeah, we're talking about being in similar boats, Bomber. They're having a very similar season to ourselves, only 2 places and 1 point behind us in the table. But it felt like, Everton needed a season of just mid-table safety, really, just nothing really happening. They wanted a boring season, really, just to get a bit of stability into the club. But it is, looking at the way the Premier League's shaping up, we talked about it. We can talk about it in a little bit about how we're looking at it. But from an Everton point of view, you look at the Premier League table and you think, God, well, those 3 are almost adrift now. Not really. How much are you looking over your shoulder? I mean, they've only won 1 in 6, which might have a few worries from there. But at the same time, the local journalist Chris Beasley told us in the opposition preview that it was going to be a sellout. First game at their first FA Cup game at their new stadium. And it sounds like Everton are up for this.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I mean, I do agree with Johnny that I think we're 2 teams that are probably not going to care too much about the FA Cup until all of a sudden there's like I say, we get into like the last 16, the last 8. The third round almost seems to be, for Premier League clubs anyway, like we'll stick out a relatively competitive side, and if we happen to be lucky enough to go through, we'll reconsider and decide whether or not we want to take it a little bit more seriously. And I think that's where we're both at. But I think you're right. The bottom 3 at the minute are so adrift. So I'm looking at the league table now, and bearing in mind we're a couple of games past the halfway point of the season now. and that bottom three has got one win between them in the last 6 games. So we're talking, or the last 5 games, sorry. So we're talking 15 games and only one win between them. 15 points adrift of Everton, 16 points adrift of us. I think us and Everton could probably, only win 2 more games the whole rest of the season and still not need to look over our shoulders, such as the form of the bottom 3 at the minute. So maybe there is scope to look at that and go, okay, well, the difference between us finishing 10th and 14th is neither here nor there, but the difference between us being knocked out in the 3rd round of the FA Cup or potentially striving for a trip to Wembley for an FA Cup semi-final final might be more valuable to them in terms of, not necessarily financially, but in terms of spotlight, of scope, of success in the season. What would mean more to us as Sunderland fans? A 10th place finish and knocked out in the 3rd round, or a 14th place finish in an FA Cup final? I would probably argue the latter, considering the start of our season was, let's just finish 17th or above. And I think Everton are probably the same. I work with a couple of Everton fans, and you're quite right, Chris, that at the start of the season, they were like, we just want mid-table obscurity as soon as possible. We're fed up with the last 2 seasons, the turmoil that the club's been in, the points deductions, the charges hanging over their heads, the way that they feel they've been mistreated in terms of some of those sanctions compared to how Forest and Leicester seem to have got off lightly by comparison. So yeah, they would love nothing more than to get to the 35 points mark and then just almost relax and just sit there and watch the rest of the season pass by. So if they're going to do that, then why not try and get excited about the FA Cup? And I think, like you said, we're 2 teams that are very, very similar in that ilk and that mentality.
Yeah, I'd say we're talking about the historic side of it from an Everton point of view. Another quick quiz question for you. Can either of you tell me Sunderland's first ever FA Cup tie at the Stadium of Light?
Was it not Everton then?
No, wasn't Everton.
Oh.
Good guess.
Went down the obvious route. First ever cup tie at the Stadium of Light. FA Cup.
Yeah.
Couldn't tell you.
Well, exactly. See, I was actually at the game, and this is my point, that I couldn't remember it. so it can't have been that historic, because we had to wait a couple of years to actually get a home draw. I think we got knocked out a couple of years in a row by Tranmere, which was annoying. But this one, we played Portsmouth in December 1999. Gavin McCann scored the winner. But you see, this is my point. That was the first FA Cup tie, and I couldn't remember. I was actually at the game. I couldn't remember it. There's only 26,000 there, so we were hardly kind of up for the historic side of being the first FA Cup tie there. But anyway, let's move on, because Johnny, a couple of things came out of the press conference. We'll cover it very quickly before we get into the team. Keith Downing talked about interest in Romain Mundle, potentially from abroad. And it was interesting the way the answer was approached by the manager. He said the conversation is open for any player who needs minutes, and the club project is the most important thing, which I thought was quite interesting.
Well, I think it's the right approach, isn't it, as well? Again, he's obviously not going to come out in a press conference and say, oh yeah, Club X have been on the phone to us and they fancy a bit of Mundle for the rest of the season. We know that he's not going to give us that, but I do think it was still slightly telling. Well, it's always telling, isn't it, what a manager does choose to reveal when he chooses to reveal stuff. But I think it just speaks again to I think there's a lot of clarity behind the scenes at Sunderland at the minute. So, you say things that sound ridiculously obvious, but they can't be that obvious because not every club operates in the same way, right? So it should be obvious that, well, we look at the team and we say, do we think that we're going to need you for the rest of the season? If the answer is yes, you stay. If the answer is no, then we're open to conversations, And obviously there's complicating factors, does the player themselves actually want to leave or want to stay and all the rest of it? But, it's a fundamentally simple equation, I think. Is Romain Mundle getting minutes at Sunderland? Yes. So if he stays, is that a good thing? Yes. If there's a good move for him to go somewhere else where he's going to, his development is going to be much better served by going there, and we think we can either compensate for his absence with what we've got, or we think we can bring another body in, then that deal makes sense. So go for it. And that's the same whether it's Mundle, Sirkin, Dan Neil, Wilson Isidore, Eliza Mayenda, Robin Roofs, Noah Siddiqui, like anyone short of Granit Xhaka, basically, the conversation is just, does this deal do something positive for us as a football club? And if the answer is no, then we shouldn't really entertain it. So it's just nice to know that messaging is quite clearly consistent between everybody. Because I think if you'd asked Florent Gazolfi or Christian Speakman or Kira Louis-Dreyfus or, any number of people in those sort of positions at the club, I think they'd have given you a very similar answer. So it's just nice to have that security, I think, and peace of mind that things are being looked at properly behind the scenes. Because, to take the case of Mundell specifically, right? Is it going to derail our season if he goes? Let's be honest, no. I like him. I think he's a good player. I think he'll still have a part to play in the rest of the season if he stays. But, if we think that he can go and find a good loan move somewhere that gets him, half a season of first-team football where he's starting week in, week out, and he can build his fitness back up properly, then, brilliant. We'll either get a better Romain Mundell next season, or his value will go up and we can move him on for some money to reinvest. So I just think, it's like a nice position to be in where the squad's in such good health that we don't need to worry about any individual transfer. Short of in January, you don't want to see a Roofs or a Siddiqui or, whoever moving on quite this early, but it's not the position that we have been in many times over the past 10, 15 years where you're looking at it and going, bloody hell, if he goes, then how the hell do we even go about thinking about replacing him? Whereas
I was going to say, Johnny, you don't have to go back too far to think about the Jack Clark transfer and how that we were all up in arms thinking it was going to derail our season and that was going to be it, and how would we ever replace him? That was only 2 seasons ago, maybe not even that. Yeah. 2 seasons. Yeah. So it's how far the club and the squad and our mentality towards, I guess, the depth of the squad and our ability to let players like that go. Because again, last season we would have probably been up in arms at the prospect of losing Romain Mundell.
Yeah.
But yeah, this season I'm very much the same as you. I'm kind of like, it's kind of a win-win for club and player if he goes or if he stays. So that there's not really a lose scenario for either, I don't think.
Yeah. Well, the other thing I wanted to mention, Bomber, was the manager was asked about Enzo Lefebvre and how he is, I suppose, after that penalty during the week. He basically just shrugged it off and he almost just kind of laughed about the question. He just said, yeah, he's fine. That's football. And he takes the lesson and moves on. But he'll be fine, won't he? It's almost like a striker just missing a sitter. That happens and you move on, isn't it?
Yeah, I think if Lefebvre was a striker struggling for goals and had done that and missed it, I think we might be having a slightly different conversation. But that you can see the confidence that Lefebvre has playing football in the Premier League, like some of the stuff he does on the ball, and the confidence to even try it in the first place. You don't try and Panenka a penalty if you haven't got 100% confidence that you're going to pull it off. And it's one of those, I could count on one hand the amount of times I've seen a goalkeeper stand still and just collect a penalty in such a way. So I don't think we could chastise him for it. I think if he tried it and it went over the bar or he hit the bar or missed the target, then we'd be like, oh man, come on, what are you doing? But 999 times out of 1,000, the keeper goes one way or the other, goes early. I watched it back on the replay as well to see if maybe he slowed up his run too early and kind of telegraphed it to Kelleher as what he was going to do. And he didn't even really do that. It was only in the last step that he kind of slowed his motion down.
Sorry, just on that as well. If you watch Kelleher, he goes as if to dive to his right, and he actually sells the dive to Lefebvre rather than you'd expect it to be the other way around, where Lefebvre sells the keeper and beats him.
Yeah,
so and you've got to give some credit to the keeper, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. The reflexes of Kelleher like you said, to go to dive one way and then decide to stick to his guns and stay there. You've got to give credit to him. But to answer your question, Chris, does it affect Lefebvre? I don't think so. You can just see ooze his confidence, and even after the game, he'd be disappointed, but there's every chance that he would have scored that, and it would have just ended up being 3-1 rather than 3-0 because Brentford were pretty relentless in that second half. So yeah, I think it'll be forgotten about. I don't think he'll dwell on it. Like I said, if it was a striker that was struggling for goals, then maybe we'd be having conversations about, oh yeah, he could have really done with that goal. But that's not Lefebvre's game. Like I said, he's flair, he's creativity, and he's confidence. That's, I think, the three things that you would use to sum him up. And I don't think that's going to change just because he chipped a penalty down the middle and the keeper made the strange decision to not go anywhere.
Yeah, he'll be fine. And but yeah, we talked about Everton's kind of point of view of looking at the FA Cup, and we've touched on us. But just looking at it, Johnny, 30 points after 21 games, and he was asked about it, this opportunity to have a cup run, and he said absolutely. He said it's important to play the game like a Premier League game, and he also talked about the kind of historical importance to the club of the FA Cup. Obviously, I'm sure in 1973. Sure, they've been forced to watch the whole 90 minutes ran through multiple times when they signed for the club. But where do you think the FA Cup stands on the list of priorities now that we're in this position?
That's the $1 million question, isn't it? This season has been so unexpected in basically every way. Everything that's happened. That it's trying to predict the second half of the season. It's like trying to read Reggie's mind. It's just, you're not going to succeed, because how on earth do how do you legislate for Brentford losing, the two of the top 5 or 6 scorers in the league last season from their team at the same time, replacing their keeper, replacing their manager. The manager who comes in was a set piece coach, and then you fast forward to the 9th of January and they're sat, 7th? Everyone was tipping them to go down. The reverse was true for us. Oh, we've come up, signed a whole new team. We're comfortably mid-table. How do you account for Liverpool spending 400 odd million quid as champions and going backwards? There's so many things that are still yet to reveal themselves, I think, about the way the Premier League's going to shake up, that you really still don't know what the barometer is for where we can aim in the second half of the season. So that makes it in some ways a nicer equation, because you can go, well, we're just looking up. We're not really looking down. So whatever we get's a bonus. So let's just go for the cup. But you could also flip it and go, 9 Premier League teams in Europe, big boys struggling, the league's very open. There might not be a better chance than this to try and crack the top 8 for the next 6, 7, 8 years. Everyone thought after Leicester's title win, this is the shake-up, and then the next few seasons, it's all normal service resumed. So in some ways, I feel like we've got to strike while the iron's hot in the league, because the FA Cup's the same every season. But then at the same time, you think, well, we're in such a safe position. Might this be the best time to go for it while we're still a bit of an unknown quantity? So I think, to be honest, I'm still leaning on the side of go for it, because I'd rather win a cup and miss out on Europe in the league than finish 8th and scrape into the Conference League by the skin of our teeth. But I can see the argument both ways.
Yeah, it was really interesting, Bomber, because he was really pushed on it in the press conference, and he kept saying that he said the squad were on the edge after the festive period, and he kept talking about how tough this festive period's been in terms of the midweek games and all of that. And you look at how much money, Bomber, is involved in every position in the Premier League. And you're talking about how ambitious we want to be. Do you think maybe the ambitions might be different from a boardroom level, where they're thinking, well, if we go on a cup run and that impacts us, maybe 6, 7 places in the league, where that's X millions, does that kind of come into the thinking?
I think it has to. Because the FA, if we're talking pure finances, the FA Cup prize money isn't actually that great. The prize fund, I think I spoke about it a couple of seasons ago when we were in the Championship, or maybe even in League One, about a cup run. If you win your quarter final, for example, in the FA Cup, you get £477,000, which compared to the difference between finishing 10th and 9th in the Premier League is absolute pittance. You finish. I'm just looking at it now. This year's winners of the FA Cup will get 2 million, whereas the difference between 10th and 9th in the Premier League is probably worth 10, 15. And that pretty much says all that you need to know about why teams don't prioritise the FA Cup, or why, at boardroom level at least, they don't prioritise the FA Cup. I'm of the mentality now with the context of who we've played and what we've done over the Christmas period, and the fact that this third round comes now after having done that, I wouldn't be adverse to us putting out, making 8 changes for the game against Everton, giving everybody else who's worked their absolute knackers off over Christmas and New Year a bit of a break, and really pushing for a top half finish. Because they say if we're saying the European places potentially goes down to 9th, that's basically the whole top half of the table, and it's very realistic that we finish in that top half if we can even come close to replicating the sort of form that we had in the first half of the season. So I would be very much of the mindset that, let's give some of the fringe players a bit of a run out. If we happen to get through and then get through into round 4 and round 5, then yeah, let's start taking it seriously. But at the moment, I want to see us push on, and 8th is a realistic not in a realistic expectation, but a realistic goal to aim at currently, which it wasn't back in August or even in September. I'd want to see us go that way. One for the finances. Like I said, I think it's about £15 million the difference between one place in the Premier League, and the potential for Europe that comes with it. I think if you balance that up, I think they're probably just as likely as one another. Well, actually, no, because the amount of rounds that you have to go through in the FA Cup and the teams that you will inevitably play against. I think it's easier for us to finish 8th or 7th than it would be for us to win 5 FA Cup games in a row, including 2 games at Wembley against probably a Man City and Arsenal and the likes. So yeah, I'd prefer, like I said, with the context of what we've just done and this game happening now, I'd prefer us to kind of rest the key players, see what happens, and go on with the rest of our season.
Yeah. Well, look, with all of that in mind, let's get into what we think the team might be. Not what we want it to be, what we think Regis will do. And we're doing this ahead of Martin posting what he thinks is the starting 11 this morning. So we wish him good luck on that one. But let's start off, Johnny. First question, Patterson in goal?
I think he has to, doesn't he? You can't leave him just totally on the bench all season. And look, he's not as good a goalkeeper as Robin Roofs, is he? But he's not a clanger. He's not. I was going to go through the list of some of our terrible old keepers, but I don't want to depress anyone any further after that quarter-final chat before. But you know what I mean? He's acceptable, isn't he, Patterson? He'll do the job for a cup game.
Yep. Bomber, you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if I was thinking actually that if it came to it and you were going to ask us to name a starting 11, Patterson would come in for Roofs. It's a tricky one because it almost is a bit hypocritical of me to say so when I'm talking about giving the players a rest. For goalkeepers, although the levels of concentration, etc., they don't have the same physical exertion as outfield players. So there would be a case perhaps to keep him in. But like Johnny said, that Patterson was kind of dropped like a stone, really, having not really done anything wrong. So I think he at least deserves to be our cup goalkeeper. So yeah, I would have him in as well.
Yeah. Then we'll go to the defence, Bomber, and you can start off this one because look, Ballard's carrying a knock. Just came back. Alderete and Michele, I thought, really needed a rest, especially Alderete. He really kind of looked off the pace and looked like he could have a bit of time off. But then you've got kind of the likes of 09, Hjelde, Sirkin waiting in the wings. I mean, do we just make wholesale changes there?
I think so. I think Luke 09 comes in. I think that's one of the reasons why he possibly came on in the Brentford game, was to kind of position that and to frame him starting at the weekend. In terms of who partners him at centre-back, if Ballard is not 100% fit, which he's not going to be, he looked like he kind of limped off at the end of the Brentford game. So Ballard and Alderete are non-starters for me and probably don't even come on off the bench. So I think we're probably looking at 09, and I wouldn't be necessarily surprised to see someone like Trey Hume sit at centre-back, or maybe even drop in Gertruida back there. So we might see Gertruida and 09 or Hume, depending on who we've got available on the wings. If we're talking full defence, I think Sirkin will probably play left back. And I'm not sure on right back, because like you said, Mukiele really does need a break as well. So yeah, it looks like if we're taking out all the people who we think need a break, doesn't really leave that many people left.
Yeah.
But I think Luke O'Nien is nailed on for a start, and so is Dennis Sirkin. But what the rest of that back four looks like, I'm not 100% certain.
Yeah, send out the bat signal to Joe Anderson wherever he is. But
Can't believe you didn't mention Leo Hjelde.
Well,
I didn't know if he was fit or not. I've not seen him apart from.
He was on the bench against Brentford. Brentford. That's why I mentioned it
Okay.
at the top.
I'd missed that.
But I was just, what do you think in that defence, Johnny?
Well, it's weird, right? Because Bomber said before that, he wouldn't be surprised or wouldn't mind if we made 8 changes and basically just went, if we get through, we get through. If we don't, well, let's focus on the league. And, I don't disagree with that necessarily. I think that's a totally sensible idea. But we're in a weird position where we make 8 changes, right? That could strengthen the team based on who's back now. Ronaldo's back. I think Traore's back. I mean, we don't know whether they're actually in training and in contention and all that, but we've got a full week between this game and Crystal Palace. So there is an argument to be made that it could be a decent time just to give some of the AFCON lads who've come back a bit of football to reintegrate them and then have a full week between now and the next league game.
But I would say, Johnny, just in response to that, in the press conference, time and time again, he said, we will not take any risks. And you've got to imagine, it might even be in their contract to have a little bit of a break after a tournament like that, because you can imagine it being intense over there.
Well, this is what I mean. Like, we have no idea what's actually going on behind the scenes with those players, whether they're in contention at all, whether it's going to be some sort of fitness test, maybe. I mean, I just think you could see some logic for giving Ronaldo a little. I'm not saying they even need to start, right? And somebody like Siddiqui, I think you give him a rest, But you could make a case for giving them some football off the bench, even if not starting them, just because, like I say, it's a bit of a low risk. And I know that Everton are going to take the game seriously, as will we, but it's going to be less intense than a Premier League game, because if we're a couple of goals down in the last 15 minutes, we're not going to start having to scrap for our lives to desperately try and claw back a couple of goals. Like, it's the kind of game where you can internally go, okay, we've lost this one now, lads. Let's just move on.
You could have at least gone on a positive spin on it, Johnny, and said when we're a couple of goals up, you can bring them on just to reintegrate them, because there's no chance of Everton getting back in the game.
That's the sign that this season hasn't rewritten me Sunderland fan wiring just yet. I've not gone back to factory settings.
Well, that's it. Look, after Patterson in goal, it's clear we haven't got a clue who's going to play at the back. So we'll move on.
Hang on. The one thing we could say, though, is, do we all think it's going to be a 4, not a 5? I don't
think we've got enough centre-backs to play 5, I don't think.
I totally agree with you, because that's what I wanted to say as well. I completely agree. Ballard and Alderete need to be nowhere near this game. Mukele's the one you could maybe make a case that his versatility means he's got to be involved, but Ballard and Alderete need a rest, man.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to midfield, because look, you've got a bit like Patterson, you've got Dan Neil waiting there, who, will he get a game? I was going to say Jay Matete for a laugh, but of course he's moved to MK Dons. So, Johnny, what we're going to do in midfield?
Well, the big one's Xhaka, isn't it? Does he play? Because you can't imagine him being the kind of character who would want a rest or take massively kindly to it, because I think he'll see this as quite a, not like big game as in, there's going to be loads of eyes on it, but I think he'll feel this is an important game, and I think he'll want to be involved, but I wouldn't mind seeing him benched. I think, he's going to be that important for us for the rest of the season, and he must have played near enough every minute, if not literally every minute of every game up to this point. So he'll probably need to come out, and then that's where the problems arise, because if you stick and get Geertruida back into defence, which makes some sense, then you can't play him in midfield. If Trey Hume isn't getting a rest, is he probably going to have to play fullback, which precludes him from going into the middle? So I think Dan Neil will get a game. I think he'll almost have to. And then I think, who goes alongside him, probably Chris Rigg, I would think, is probably going to be in line for some more football here because, as Bomber said, he's started one or two of the games since AFCON began. I think he started at Brighton and he started against Leeds and then he started against Brentford. So 3 over that period of 5 games. So he's had a couple of games off. So I think he can play in there. But then you're slightly scrabbling around to find the third option, I think, because I wouldn't want to say Enzo Lafay start the game either. I think he's the one you could make most of an argument for in that it could give him a chance to bounce back from the penalty miss, but I also don't think they'll care internally about that, and it'll more be about keeping him fresh. So, yeah, Dan Neil, I think, is basically nailed on, and Chris Rigg next to him. But then apart from that, it's a lot of guesswork, really.
Yeah. See, I think Granit Xhaka is probably the one person who's nailed on to start. I think we make changes.
Yeah, I think you will as well. I agree with you. I just wouldn't myself, but I think you will.
I agree. So my midfield 3, I think, would be Xhaka, Dan Neil, and probably Chris Rigg. Not what I would have, like Johnny said, but what I think might well happen. And just to answer your question, Johnny, I just had a quick look. So Granit Xhaka has played 90 minutes in every single game apart from Man City away, where he played 70 minutes.
Yeah, because of the yellow card.
Yeah, so he literally missed 18 minutes of football all season.
Yeah, and he's brilliant, and his legs have definitely not gone, but they'll go quicker if he doesn't get a rest at some point.
Oh yeah. I just think he is the one person that kind of has to be guaranteed to be in there if we're deciding that Diarra and Siddiqui are non-starters because they're coming back from AFCON and got through to the knockout stages as well. So if we're saying that Diarra will still be out there actually, won't he?
Yes, Senegal is still in.
Yeah, whereas Congo are back. But if they're not available, then there isn't really anybody else, and we do need that sort of stability, that experience in there, especially if they're going to be in and around players who have been fringe players all season. I think they're going to need to lean on Xhaka a little bit more than we probably do when we're full strength in the Premier League. I think that's the midfield 3.
Yeah. Well, you look at the bench against Brentford. Harrison Jones, Tucherov. I mean, are these players just on the bench just because they're filling spaces, or would we not trust them?
Again, it's all kind of ifs and buts, isn't it? Because if Regis wants to get through the third round of the FA Cup, he will probably put those players on the bench and give them a run out if we're a couple of goals down or a couple of goals up. But he's not going to be putting them on the pitch to rely on them to beat Everton at Everton. It's really it's just an enigma, isn't it? That nobody can really solve, such as Regis Lebrie's brain. I think they'll be in and around the squad.
I mean, he gave starts, he gave minutes, if not starts, didn't he, to Ogunsui against Stoke last season in the Cup, I think, and he definitely gave the likes of Jones and those some minutes in those games. So Harrison Jones for me is actually the more interesting one, isn't it? He could start the game.
He's really highly rated at the club. They really think he could go places. So it kind of makes sense when the opportunity arises to try and give him minutes. But just moving on to up front, because I mean, by the sounds of it, and with the time, and I can't see is it all being involved. I'd be really surprised because they said he was training, but he said he's not going to take risks. So I'd be highly surprised with the minutes he's had. Johnny, Mayenda up front.
Yeah, I think it's bit of a no-brainer, isn't it? Like you say, Isidore's probably not going to be involved, or if he's involved, he'll be on the bench. And Brian Brobby's just played so much football. I think he's earned a bit of a rest as well. I thought in a very poor performance, I thought Brobby was excellent against Brentford.
Yeah,
he really he showed us why he can be so valuable to the team. Even when we were bad, he was still getting us up the pitch, dragging people out of position, won the penalty. And so you wouldn't want to take a risk, would you? Because we don't have anybody else. And it's a little bit like the Xhaka argument, but it's almost the flip side. So Bomber was saying, Xhaka gives us something nobody else does. So we just need him on the pitch, even though we might want to rest him. Whereas Brobby's the opposite, where he gives us something nobody else can. So let's not risk him because, later in the season, we are going to need him in away games in particular. And
I think the difference is that the fringe players, the players who haven't played so much this season, your Dan Neils, your Chris Riggs, your Luca Nines, etc., they're not going to rely on Brian Brobby to help get them through potentially 90 minutes of football, having not played that much football this season. Whereas Granit Xhaka absolutely will do that.
Yeah, that's it. Well, look, I think it's a really tough one, but I'm going to ask the question anyway, and I'm going to start with you, Bomber, because look, until you see the team sheets, it's going to be really difficult. But have you got a good feeling? Are we going through the fourth round?
I'm going to go with, because we don't have absolutely any clue whatsoever as to what either manager is going to do, I'm going to say for me a 1-1 draw, and we're going to win on penalties, and Enzo Lefebvre is going to score the winning penalty.
It's funny because in the preview I have said, back in the day, this would have been nailed on for a replay, I reckon. But I don't think either club want that. I mean, Johnny, have you got a feeling either way?
I want what Bomber said to happen. I think it would be beautiful karmic retribution if Enzo gets the winning penalty. But yeah, to be honest, I agree with you, Chris. If this still had replays, this would be nailed on for either a 0-0 or a 1-1, where nobody's happy afterwards because everyone's got extra fixtures and everyone's played shit. To be honest, I think we're going to have to make changes. As we've just been through the team there, God knows what we're going to pick. I do think it's going to end up being weaker than our already weakened team we've been playing in the league. So
just come and join me on the fence, Johnny. Come on.
Listen, I want to be sat on the fence with you, Bomber. I really do. But I do think we're going to get beat. I think it'll be 1-0. Yeah, I know. I feel dirty saying it, but, what we're going to do, man. We've got Harrison Jones coming up against David Moyes' mighty Everton.
Who knows what David Moyes is going to do? But anyway, looking at the weather forecast, I think at best I should say wrap up warm to everyone, but just wish everyone safe travels to and from Merseyside, because like I said, the weather doesn't look great. But if you listen to Bomber, he has predicted a bit of an epic where we'll eventually come out on top, and the world will be right. But that just leaves me to say thank you very much, Johnny. Always a pleasure, mate.
Yeah, always a pleasure, never a chore, Chris. Thank you.
And thank you very much, Bomber, for predicting a positive outcome.
Yeah, well, we've got to spin some positivity on it because, like I said, not many people care about the FA Cup anymore. So I'm gonna enthuse people with my predictions.
We just don't care about it because we just protect ourselves for the disappointment of getting knocked out early.
Basically, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, add to our massive number of scalps, Shrewsbury and Everton in the past 5 years. Yeah, let's go, lads.
Well, that's it. I couldn't even remember the last time we were in the Cup, so I had to look it up. But anyway, enjoy your weekend, gents, and thanks again for everyone for listening. Don't forget, if we're not enough for your pre-match consumption, we've got loads more build-up on the Rugger Report website, and don't forget, we'll have a pod with immediate reaction after the final whistle, whenever that might be, because, of course, it might go to extra time and penalties, which, of course, will be fun. But anyway, that might be just potentially a few hours away with the early kickoff. So look out for all of that. But from us, it's bye for now.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Sports Social Podcast Network, the biggest voices in sport. Let's take a look at some of the lineup. Big Kick Energy.
Well, I was doing a Zoom gig and somebody got up and went and made a cup of tea, and I just heard them go, not for me.
Late Breaking.
Verstappen has more sprint wins than Leclerc has regular wins.
Wisden Cricket Weekly.
Draw rounder. Tough, really close between Stokes and Flintoff, but I went Stokes. The whole package, I think, beats Flintoff.
All on Europe's biggest sport podcast network. Find your next favourite sport podcast. Search Sports Social Podcast Network and listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Verified comparison at content.sport-social.co.uk/comparison.